Hey, how's it going? My name is Carter Hall, your host of the What Really Happened podcast. We'll be diving into my top 5 sports documentaries. Shout out to you for hitting play, and shout out to Blueborn for beat drop. He's the one who created this new intro song for us, so we'll have him on at some point. But today we'll be diving into my top 5 sports podcast. So let's get into it. Cheers. Hey, how's it going? My name is Carter Hall, and thank you for hitting play once again. We're going to be talking about my top 5 sports documentaries. But before we get into that, I just want to say, when it comes to top 5, these are usually some of the hardest things I ever have to do because um, there's so many good. I grew up a sports fan. I grew up doing sports. Football, amateur wrestling, things of that nature. But you know, it's so hard because it feels like you got to respect all different aspects of sports and all sports in general. So this was a list that, well, not it would be kind of it's kind of hard curating if that makes sense because I've seen a lot of sports docs that were like really I think that I personally thought were really good, but um when I make this list, there's no like order of which way I created it. It's just more just something that I really had to think back and go watch some of them again and like, okay, these are top 5 that I think could stand the test of time, but this is a really hard list to be honest with you because at the end of the day, everybody has, documentaries are like art and documentaries are, I think, art is subjective. So it just depends on the person. And who knows, my list may change tomorrow. So, who knows? So when I create this list, I'm not like saying this is the order I put them in specifically, like ranking wise, as this is a list that I put them in. Like these are my top 5, like legit my top 5, like all overall. These are like number 5 is number 5, but not necessarily like 5 overall. If that makes sense, you'll hopefully that makes sense. As I try to clear my throat for the upteenth time in this podcast. So you headphone users out there, I'm sorry. I'll try to clear this out as much as possible and edit in post production. But so what's not right? Let's get right into it, shall we? So I believe at number 5 is a docu series. Not so much a sports documentary, but it's docu series that I believe that I've watched who knows how many times at this point. It's The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan sports podcast or documentary, excuse me, that came out during the 2020 pandemic. And I believe this podcast came at the right place, or came out at the right place at the right time. Kinda, unfortunately, if I could say that right. Um, the pandemic was something crazy. I'm not going to get right into the pandemic, but it feels like this documentary rather kind of gave some insight at a time where everybody kind of wanted something to watch, and everybody was in their house bunkered up. In this documentary or docu-series, they had 2 episodes a week that come out, and there's 10 episodes total, so that's 5 weeks. Yeah, 5 weeks. I'm not a good mathematician, but yeah, it came out, and the first 2 episodes are kind of getting into what the Bulls like. Each episode, what I kind of liked about it, the whole series as a general, is that like it talked about individually like each player, but it overall like would talk about the whole team. Like it have like individual aspects. Like the first episode will talk about Michael Jordan, how he went to University of North Carolina, how he went to living in Chapel Hills all the way to being drafted. A crazy draft, by the way. How many like Hall of Famers were in that draft alone? All the way, getting drafted by the Chicago Bulls and starting his young career to where he is at now. His early experiences, which I've never really heard of. I know he went to the University of North Carolina. But he was a Tar Heel and went to become a Bull, eventually. But I never knew like that whole transition, like how he was like a new guy, had to earn his. Even Michael Jordan had to earn his spot. He said he felt like that he had to like earn a spot. He didn't have any straps on the team, which is crazy to think the caliber of what Michael Jordan is. Everybody can puts him at the top of the list, the Mount Rushmore, the things of that nature. and then it's just crazy that was he pretty much he put the sport of basketball on his back and really took it somewhere different because everybody was comparing him like he's too short for a basketball player to be a star on his team because everybody at that time was you had to be a 7 foot guy or taller to really do something in the game of basketball, and he was the 6'5", 6'6" guard that came and could do everything. He can play. He's all around basketball player. He could shoot. He can pass. He can, even though passing was, he hated passing, I think, early on. But when, the new coach, the newest coach, came in, the one that coached him for the two three-peats, Phil Jackson, he pretty much made Michael pass and made him believe in his teammates, which is kind of crazy, you know, on that level too. But what I liked about this, each episode too, kind of going back into it, the first episode was about Michael. The second one was about Scottie Pippen, him growing up, and each episode was different, and each episode gave more as the episodes went on. Um, with each individual episode, they talked about and broke down different things that would happen on the team, like when Dennis Rodman missed a playoff game to go to WCW one night and wrestle with Hulk Hogan and all of that. It's just crazy how the team felt because you always heard about one side of the story, but not both. But this time, I actually got to hear the other side of the story and how the Bulls felt about that, and rightfully they felt angry and anything like that. But so that's pretty neat. I think that's why I put it up there because I always watch this whole series. Who who knows how many times, but I believe this series actually provides information that really gave that. How can I say this? This series kind of gave more insight as to who Michael Jordan was, who the Bulls overall were at that time. The management with everybody, ownership. It felt like it came really at a good. I mean, I want to say it came at a good time, but like it provided information at a time that people really wanted something to watch, and it knocked it out of the park, I believe. So that's why I put The Last Dance where it was, because it just I think eventually 10 years, 15 years from now, people are still going to be talking about The Last Dance, so the series itself. So that's why I personally love The Last Dance. So the next on the list I have 30 for 30, another sports, kind of a documentary that these aren't so much what I like. So let me restart this. So 30 for 30 are these, if you're not familiar with them, are these like little clips or these little shows. They're like documentaries, but they're like shows that cover each episode covers something different. Like for example, I believe there's one for Straight Out of LA that talks about the LA, Rams and NWA and the cross pollination and everything like that, and counterculture and all that. So it talks about going in depth like that, and talks about all these different athletes and different things within sports. Not so much athletes; it also covers different things in sports. Like they have a 30 for 30 podcast as well that I listen to on Spotify, which also you should check out. Um, like for 30 for 30 on Spotify, they talked about it's pretty much like a documentary, but for years also. So it's pretty amazing. The same kind of value production that they put into the actual video, like TV wise, they also put into the same thing for audio too. So they put one about hoodies up, about talking about Trayvon Martin, that whole situation, and how the Miami Heat reacted during All Star Weekend. And it's just pretty crazy how they go in depth about certain situations, about certain players, coaches, or different situations that kind of help shape and mold, you know, different sports, whether if it was baseball, basketball, football, soccer, whatever. It just kind of covered, you know, everything, and then some. So it was just kind of pretty interesting to hear that, what 30 for 30 does too. So that's something I kind of put at number 4. Number 3, I put Last Chance U, more specifically, season 5. The first 4 seasons were pretty good, were great, but I think something about season 5, they it's like, so let me tell you what Last Chance U is if you don't know. Last Chance U is about community colleges around America. About these, first 5 seasons were about football, talking about how these kids, these college students at a community colleges, don't have any offers to go anywhere, to any D1, D2 schools, D3, nowhere. They have nowhere. Like that's why it's so called Last Chance Youth. So they go to a community college to hopefully get eyes on them and have them play, and have them hopefully have the opportunity to go into a D1 or even D2 school and play football. And what happened with season 5, I believe, was so what made it so unique is that I believe they only had one. So season 1 and 2 covered the same school, same community college, and same thing. But when I went to season 3 and 4, it was a new school, but they covered the same school. And then season 3 and 4, if that makes sense. Season 5, they only covered this community college out in Oakland, California once, and then by season 6, they kind of revamped it and made it a basketball season out of it. So same premise, but for basketball instead of football this time. So season 5, I believe, was really, I would have liked to watch that football season a little bit, my football program a little bit more from Oakland, because it was so unique and so different than the last 4 seasons prior to that. So um, even season 6 of the basketball season, it really felt like that was unique and different at the same time. The coaching styles, it's pretty interesting hearing all the different coaching styles from even season 1 to season 6. There were so many ways, to coach. I never realized there's so many different ways to coach athletes at even high school, or community college level, or even college level as a whole. So that's pretty interesting to get a glimpse into it and actually see how real life athletes live, and even at the community college level, to hopefully get their time to sign at a D1 or D2, D3 level school, and hopefully make it to the big leagues of the NFL or NBA, things of that nature. So that's why I put it at Last Chance U, or season 5, specifically at number 3. Excuse me. And the next one, number 2, I kind of want to talk about, which would be a pretty fun one, and that's number 2 comes A Football Life. I believe these are all A Football Life. All these different shows really talk about different things. Like, it's all things football. Obviously, it's in the title, but they'll talk about different things, such as you know Tony Romo, him coming from Chicago all the way to being a Dallas Cowboy. Eventually him retiring and Dak Prescott taking over. Like, they each episode covers something different. Like, as well within football, they cover athletes, they cover football, they cover, like, Tony Romo. Obviously, being a Dallas Cowboys fan, was one of my favorite ones. Another good one I would recommend if you're listening is the Warren Sapp episode, who is a former defensive tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before they are what they are now. And they won a Super Bowl with Warren Sapp back in the early 2000s, but they also like talk about how bad they used to be in the early, in the mid and late 90s, all the way to Warren Sapp's career, him following, leaving Tampa to go to Oakland and playing there. His competition against Brett Favre is probably one of the most iconic feuds you ever see in basketball or football, excuse me. And it's just crazy that a healthy competition like that doesn't have to be personal, but as long as it's like on the field and it starts on the field, I believe that's pretty crazy. Pretty interesting that you're challenging each other in a good way. And Warren Sapp and Brett Favre did that all the time. Brett Favre being a Hall of Fame quarterback and Warren Sapp being a Hall of Fame defensive lineman really exemplified that, to the highest. So that's pretty. Each episode really dives into something big in football and really talks about it. They don't leave anything out. That's what I liked about it, because you're really gaining some more. They talk about big things, and they also dive into why it was such a big deal. So that's why I like A Football Life documentary, because that's pretty interesting. But that's why I like it. The competition aspect of things. That's why I always liked it, and uh, watch them all the time. I rewatch so many of these documentaries all the time. Speaking of rewatching documentaries all the time, I have, last but not least, number 1, um, is Conor McGregor Notorious. This documentary was on Netflix. I don't know if it is now, but if you haven't had the chance to go watch it, I recommend. If it's on a Netflix, rent it, buy it. I don't. I mean, do whatever you want to do, but um, definitely go give it a watch because not even if you're an MMA fan, because I've had friends of my that come on the podcast who are big into MMA. Obviously like people like Morgan Lighty or Sarah Too Sweet Apart who is in the UFC, and it's pretty interesting to watch Conor McGregor's documentary called Conor McGregor Notorious, and talks about him leaving a plumbing job of all things in Ireland to start a career in MMA. Who loved fighting? Who loved? I mean, not fighting like out in the streets, but like fighting like as a mix like an MMA like aspect. Like he loved fighting. Like he really wanted to taste a dream. He left his plumbing job and really sells footage of him from like 2010 or 11, something like that, training with next to no equipment at all, which is kind of completely like baffles me because like me being a former amateur wrestler in high school or anything like that, it's like I can't imagine going to wrestling practice and competing or getting ready for a weekend tournament, and not having headgear, like my headgear, or having wrestling shoes, or having a mouthpiece. I wear a mouthpiece. It's not, you don't have to wear a mouthpiece, but me not having a mouthpiece or a wrestling suit, like, or a singlet, or it's just crazy. Like things that like you need to compete in. He didn't had like even training. He didn't have a whole lot of it. And at one point, they even talks about him, sparring with in the early days, and the guy he was sparring with was like a ranked. I forget the guy's name, but it's leaving me. But a ranked UFC like fighter, and he barely had any like head equipment. Like head equipment, it's just crazy. Like head equipment, they ranked UFC fighter didn't have any head equipment, and um, Connor kind of talks about it jokingly and everything like that. But and it kind of talks about the evolution of what Conor McGregor is and what he became. Talks about by the end of it, talks about him going against Floyd Mayweather, starting out as it's kind of crazy that Conor, even though if you may not, even if you're an MMA fan or whatever, you're not a big Conor McGregor fan, kind of tells you like, because I was like that too in high school. I hated Conor McGregor, and then you just kind of look back at the bigger picture, like, man, this guy's really done a lot for the sport. I mean, there's a lot of people in UFC and MMA in general who've done a lot for the sport, or a handful of guys. I think Conor McGregor's one of them. Conor McGregor for sure. Randy Couture, um, you know, all these different guys. Cain Velasquez, all these, Gracie's, obviously, all these different people who really done good for the sport. And there's also people on the other side of the coin who try to tear it down. People, I believe, who are doing it for the clout. People like the Paul brothers, all these different people who try to, think it's easy to get in the octagon. Me being a former wrestler, there's no way I'm getting in that octagon. You have to be crazy and a half to get in the octagon and train and fight. Not train, but fight. You could be stepping to the ring, an octagon, and you don't know how you're going to end up. You don't even know if you're going to walk out. Like, I've seen people get injured. Like Conor McGregor, for example, he talks about an injury he had during training, and he had to put his fight back. And then it's just crazy. You have to check out this documentary, Conor McGregor Notorious, because he goes all in depth with his training, how he got to the MMA or to the UFC rather, and talk about so many different like aspects of fighting. Like I don't know, it's just crazy. Like he talks about how he's able to heal himself and how his training process is as to getting better and also training for a fight that's coming up. It's just crazy. There's one scene, I'm not gonna say what entirely because I don't want you all to watch it, but there's one part where he talks about like he has a fight coming up, but he just did something to his knee or leg or his tibia or knee or something like that rather, and he's training for a fight. He's on a ski rig. The only reason I know what a ski rig is because I worked at a Tornado Valley CrossFit, and that's where I work conditioning. But he's doing a ski rig, and he walks away, and he's had a crutch and one of his he to walk. He has one crutch walking to help him walk, and it's just crazy that he went on. literally trying to heal his leg and training at the same time for a fight. And who knows, that could re-injure. Who knows if people are gonna, watch another re-injure to that same leg or not, or watch a new injury form or whatever. But it talks about also Conor going against Jose Aldo and training and knocking him out in the first few seconds of the fight. What's his some crazy power, and everything about this documentary I think was pretty fun to watch for me at least. But I think it would be fun for even the non MMA fan, or even if you're a sports fan, not MMA, get into it, or who are not into it. I think you'll be this documentary, Conor McGregor Notorious, would be a pretty good transition into um, MMA if you would want to try to get into it, because it helps you learn the backside of some stuff and also hear some fun things out as to like a fighter's perspective and things of that nature. So I think it'd be pretty fun to actually like hear from a high up like Conor level, hear him out and anything like that. So that's all my top five. So hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, because it's pretty fun putting it together. So um there's a lot of good sports docs out there. So um that's pretty much all I watch when I'm not at work. What's my job is, I'm a sports intern, so my everyday life is part of sports. So um yeah, sports is pretty fun to watch. So thank you all for listening, and hopefully y'all have watched these or will watch these, and let me know in the comments how y'all will like them or dislike them, whatever. Let me know. So if you have any more sports documentaries to throw out, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to watch them and get back at y'all. So maybe create a new top five list or whatever. Um, yeah. So thank y'all for listening. Hope you have a great Feel Good Friday. A little bit longer today, surprisingly. So that's when I say thank y'all. Hopefully, I have some really cool guests coming up in the near future. So be on the lookout for that. So in the meantime, hope y'all have a great Feel Good Friday. Rest of your weekend. This is Carter Hall for What Really Happened podcast, and peace out. See y'all.